Welcome back to another episode of Beekeeping Buddies. I'm Steven.
And I'm Luke.
We're here to talk about local beekeeping yet again. We usually start off talking about what's going on around our yards. And, I don't want to always be like the opening segment is talking about weather, but holy cow, man. Like, you can't ignore the fact that it's snowing today.
Yeah, and Mother Nature has changed her mind again, and it's kind of more like what I would expect an Illinois spring to be like. Right?
And we're in April now, and it's
still spring. It's still
spring. We've had April snow before. Granted, however, I've never done splits before. I've never done splits and then had it snow on my new splits. And to be honest, I did splits last weekend.
Yep, I did multiple splits. I did 6 splits last weekend, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about them right now.
I mean, now to be clear, we weren't just doing splits to do splits. My hive was bursting. Yep. I mean, absolutely bursting. Double deep, 10 frame, double deep, and I made an 8 frame split because I had a solid 14 to 16 frames that had brood on them.
So I made 4 frame splits, and there's a feeder in there. So feeder, frame of honey, half a frame of pollen, and lots of bees.
I mean, well, lots of bees. I had at least 3 capped frames. I had a solid frame of open, and then I had like 3 frames of partially emerged with a honey cap around the edges kind of thing.
Yeah, that sounds like I wouldn't be as worried about that one. I'm more worried about the 4 framers being able to stay warm through this weather.
And so my other hive was not nearly as strong, but I still split it because it was still a full 10 deep. And I split that into a classic 5. I put that into a 6 frame styrofoam Finland.
Lyson nuke? Probably Lyson.
Oh, I don't know. I always call them Finland because they have Finland stamped on the front.
Yeah,
that's
what they're used over there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's insulated, and it's a 6 frame, so...
Did you put feeders in there?
I did not put feeders in because I had moved a frame of honey over with the 6th frame of the 5 frame was a frame of honey.
I put feeders in, and I haven't fed. So there's feeders there waiting for it. I saw the weather, and I thought, well, they're going to be clustered up anyway. They're not going to go to that food.
So we're going to have a week of rainy, like highs in the 40, lows close to 30, 30 to 32.
Tonight?
Yeah.
And we've got some interesting blooms already happening.
I had a whole slew patch of dandelions that were just popping out just like it was. Because it was 70, right? Like it was sunny and 70.
Yep. And the bees are working them. So I have a picture of where I made some splits. A lady called me up that I've been helping with her hives, and she said, hey, I only want these 2, and can you come take a look at the bees? So I came out and took a look at the bees. One of them's got a little bit of a spotty pattern. Not bad, but I think mite counts are probably high on it. So we did an OA treatment on it. And then the other one is so bursting at the seams that I made a split off of it, and then replaced with drawn comb. We had some drawn comb available.
Yep.
So we replaced the drawn comb, and then we threw her honey super on top. Other than that, in the yard, I need to be cleaning up some of my dead outs. This is actually a pretty good temperature to clean up your dead outs. And bees there's not a whole bunch of bees out flying when it's just at 50.
Well, we got packages coming.
We got packages coming on the 20th.
Yeah. So we gotta get our woodenware prepped for that.
How long are you comfortable with bees sitting in a package? Say they show up and the weather just dumps on us. It's 30 degrees. It's going to be 30 degrees for a couple of days.
So here's the deal. I know our supplier drives down on like a Thursday, and they load the truck on a Friday, and he starts driving back on a Friday, and then the pickup is Saturday morning. So I know, and he said that they are shaking those packages Thursday when he's driving down.
Yeah, and still shaking as he's driving up, as he's picking them up.
So and they have only used maybe a quarter to a third of the can of syrup when we unpackage those.
I feel that's probably overestimating.
Sure.
They've almost used nothing.
Those cans are very heavy.
Yes.
Now, I have, before we switched to our local supplier, we had bought packages from Dayton, and they had come from California, and they'd been on a truck for like a week. What I'd heard was 5 days to get from California.
Yep.
And those cans of syrup were empty.
Yeah, or almost empty.
So with those two pieces of information laid out, and I know that the first package that shows up from my local guy is going to be there for 3 days, do I feel like I have a solid 2 more days I could leave them in that package in a properly regulated environment? If push comes to shove, you could probably do that. However, here's my counterpoint. One of the first years I was beekeeping, I got them through U.S. Postal Service, delivered to my address. It was a fun interaction with the postal guy. But it was a rainy, nasty day, and I had been told it was imperative to get them installed. And so I moved my lower deep and bottom board and, basic hive into my shed, and I shucked my package in my shed, and I closed them all up, and I carried them outside in the rain and set them up. And because I felt like getting them out of the box into a hive was fundamentally a better place for them to be than cooped up in the package, even in a decent environment for another day.
Okay. I think it's also noticeable because you can see the amount of bees that die in the bottom of the box.
Yes.
And with our local provider, the bee kill in the bottom of those boxes is way less than anything I've gotten that's been shipped
almost negligible.
Yeah, been shipped from anywhere further away. Now, are some of those bees going to die anyway because they've been shaken up and beaten up and whatever else? Maybe.
Perhaps.
But
now
it's still.
Would you ask me to put packages in while it's actively drizzling or raining? Oof. That's a recipe for a spicy day.
Sad afternoon.
And I don't know that I want to stand there in my wet
I've done it.
Suit and shake packages. I know the story is that the commercial guys do it because they don't have the time frame.
Yeah. I've done it, and it's not fun. The bees don't fly very much. So I would say not real spicy as far as getting stung, but not pleasant as far as an experience.
But for our average hobby listener,
yeah, wait till tomorrow.
Keep them in the garage.
Yeah, keep them in the garage. Don't put them in the sunlight. You might think, oh, I'm going to put them in the sunlight so that they're nice and warm. Don't do that. Just cool garage, darkness.
Dark,
is just fine for them. They're normally dark in the hive anyway. I got another question for you, though. I know we got a lot to cover on this one. But the other question is, say that there's packages for pickup, and you can buy a package, and they're $140. And for another $20, you can buy a 5-frame nuke. Which one are you buying?
I mean, that 5-frame nuke comes with so much more resources in terms of an established colony. My follow-up question would be, when am I getting the two?
Same dates.
Same dates?
Yep.
That's a no-brainer. That's a 5-frame package every day, all day long. Now, typically...
5-frame nuke, yeah.
Yeah, 5-frame nuke. And typically, when you say that 5-frame package, you're going to say like middle of May to June almost for that delivery date. And now I'm going, well, I kind of want my bees in April versus the end of May, right? I kind of want them doing bee things in their hive for a full 6 weeks more.
Right.
And if that was the case, I'd lean toward the package. But if you're telling me you had a package and a 5-frame nuke sitting together in a parking lot and take your pick, 140 or 160, like I'd be all over the 5-framer.
Yeah, I think I agree. Even if I understood that, hey, that 5-framer, that queen's just somebody bought a queen from Georgia or further south, and they put that queen in that hive, and they've been there for a week. Even if it's a week later, I still think, as long as she's laying, as long as I can check it out, she's laying.
I was going to say, yeah. Are you?
But I need to be able to check it out.
Yeah.
And any reputable seller, any reputable bee seller is going to sit there and say, yes, you can check these out, or allow you to go through it yourself, or sometimes we'll go through it with you.
Go through it with you. Because that's the other thing is you don't want a Yahoo throwing a package into a 5-frame nuke and then calling it putting it in a 5-frame box, and then calling it, jacking the price up another $80 or $100, and then calling it a established 5-frame nuke when it's been a shuck package 2 weeks ago, right?
Which
you get a tiny brood packet, tiny brood pattern,
and you hear about it all the time.
Right? Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, or you hear about like it's a 5-frame nuke. There's 2 frames that are totally empty that are brand new.
Yeah,
there's 1 frame of honey and 2 frames of bees.
If you're lucky,
right? And that's not a nuke.
That's pretty thin.
Yeah.
Around the yard, every now and then we get to have the privilege, maybe, of introducing. I know you take a lot of people through your bee yard. I know you've done some local news spots about beekeeping and things, and had some of the news anchors around your bee yard. I do a lot of work with the local club and open apiary days where the newest of new beekeepers can come out and be hands-on with a hive. And those reactions of people sort of run the gamut in terms of, I get some that are really timid despite the fact that they're enthusiastic. So you hand them a frame of bees, and it's like you handed them a live grenade. And then the other side of that coin is you have people that are just super excited and jump in, much like you were when you were a student, just excited to know every aspect. And so what's have you got a great experience of that you'd like to share of?
Oh yeah, I've got 2. One on the scared side. I actually had somebody come out, asked to look at my bees. I won't name names, but he's terrified of flying insects. And if he sometimes listens to this podcast, so he'll know who he is. And his wife also likes bees. I swear I took the lid off of that beehive, and it was easy 3 or 4 steps back, away from the hive, right? Because there's that normal.
This is what he's suited. You gave him a suit, right?
Oh yeah, he's suited. He's gloved up. I double gloved him up because he's afraid of being stung. So he had 2 nitrile sets of gloves on. So it's really difficult for him to get through that.
Sure.
And so he wasn't getting stung, but he still had that natural step backwards from it. Now my father-in-law was in town, just this over Easter weekend, and we went through a hive with him. He was fascinated, just simply fascinated by the bees. It was one of my strong hives that actually we did a split on. So he did a split. We looked at frames and stuff, and he actually chose frames. So those of you that are afraid of doing splits and beekeeping, it's really, really not that hard once you understand what you're looking for. We found the queen and stuff, and his wife stayed in the car with my wife. So Kelly stayed in the car explaining what was going on to his wife because she didn't want to be out there. But he suited up. I've got a picture of him holding a frame. And as I pulled one of the frames out, I said, these bees really aren't interested in stinging me. And he's like, yeah, sure. And so I actually touched the frame of bees. You can touch them real lightly.
Sure.
So I moved my hand across the frame. I knew the queen wasn't on there. I wasn't going to scare her. I didn't want her to fly somewhere, right? That's when your heart breaks when the queen can't fly, but she lands softly in the grass nearby, and you got to go find her. But no, so I was touching the bees, and he was mesmerized. It was a good experience. I always suggest have another suit, and if there's somebody that shows any interest in coming out and looking at bees, I mean, it's an opportunity to make a new beekeeper, or at least dispel some of the fears that happen out there. Even the guy that listens to the podcast and was afraid. You get over some of the fear when you realize a lot of the media hype around, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get stung to death, is just hype, right?
Yeah,
and fear sells.
If you're excited about it and you haven't reached out to a local beekeeper in your area, absolutely, I'm sure they'll be love to provide you with an opportunity to go through some hives and get some hands-on beekeeping. Look up your local club. That's what they're there for.
Yep. If you're just looking for like a day out, a lot of my apiary does like a day with a beekeeper. We sit around, we talk about bees, we try some honey, and then we go suit up and go look at the hives. So there's all kinds of opportunities out there for all kinds of people.
Our next big, and typically our in the news segment is sort of a quick highlight of some of the stuff that caught our eye in the past week or two. I had noted that I hadn't come up with much, so I put the note out to you. And apparently you hit the jackpot in this month's ABJ, American Bee Journal. If you're a beekeeping hobbyist or otherwise, and you're not subscribed to the ABJ, I suggest you do that. It's a great resource. And so flipping through that, Charles Linder, who's an Illinois native here, has had 2 articles published this month. This is April 2024. With some real on-the-nose points about beekeeping that I feel like we should talk about. The first is it's entitled, "What the Bleep Are We Doing? Our Industry Needs Stable Professional Leadership." And I think this is something we've talked about in terms of trying to have, I'll dial this back a little bit more to a local level, right? We've talked about having experienced beekeepers in our local clubs in order to have some guidance and some, leadership there.
Yep.
It sounds like the challenges that we're facing on our local level extend all the way to our national level in terms of understanding some of the upcoming challenges that we are currently going to be facing because, and this leads into his second article, the EPA and the FDA and the updates that have occurred or are currently ongoing, I guess.
Have happened. I think you could say it's ongoing, right? It's the EPA. It's an ongoing conversation that beekeepers have had with the EPA for quite a while. And I remember you and I talking about, what to do about the mite problems and, hey, do we use vaporized oxalic acid? Well, it hasn't been approved, but it's approved overseas. And that's a conversation that beekeepers should have been having with the EPA.
We tend to lag behind our other countries in terms of our regulatory guidelines for treatments of things. Our FDA for our Food and Drug Administration for our medicines and things like that. Other countries have treatments for things that we don't have, things like that. And prior to recently, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, had been the one responsible for overseeing the organic methods of mite control. And apparently, the EPA is looking to hand that off to the FDA.
I don't know if it's hand off is the right term, or the FDA is looking to take control of that. It's largely because there's a term in there that I'd never heard of before. Ectoparasites is the term, and realistically, it's being rolled in because of dogs and cats. The dogs and cats are covered underneath this ectoparasite portion of our regulation, and bees, the mites on bees, are also going to be covered in that. So that's where that regulation is being grabbed by the FDA by.
Previously, it was run by the EPA under the FIRFRA, or the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Roticide Act, which the EPA used to govern registration, distribution, and sale of pesticides. As a reminder for everybody out there, a pesticide being anything that's designed to kill or control a pest. And it turns out that because you're like, oh, yeah, sure. Well, here's the thing. It also goes on to say, any product that you claim to kill a pest has to be licensed, tested, and approved for you to sell. And this sort of comes to really the point of the nail of the issue for beekeeping and our vaporized oxalic acid, our organic acids that we're trying to use and we have been using to treat our bee mites. These include things like Apistan and checkmite, And previously the EPA had sort of a fairly hands-off, kind of a gray area concerning.
I would say a huge gray area.
Yeah,
it has been a real gray area. What can you do? What can you not do? Especially with organics.
Right, and like you said earlier, the vaporized oxalic acid had been approved in Europe for years before we finally got approval several years ago, and then the approval had a bunch of gray area associated with it in terms of what is your authorized supplier, because as it says, you have to be licensed and approved to sell it. Despite the fact that this is just wood bleach, right? You hear that commonly, right? Like I can get oxalic acid for many other applications. So like, why does it have to be tested and approved for sale? Well, it turns out it's for this application, right?
Right.
And so I guess for whatever reason, the FDA is now going to potentially step in and decide to take over regulation of our mite treatments and potentially other parts of our beekeeping in terms of under the guise of the honey is a food product, right? And so as a food product, this, I guess, they feel needs better regulation concerning what goes on potential food products.
Well, yeah, food products, and also just in general, they're covering cats and dogs, and those have ectoparasites, and so bees have ectoparasites, so it gets lumped together in a, I would say, unfair or ignorant fashion.
And so both Charles and another well-known beekeeper, Randy Oliver, who's been working on oxalic acid treatments for some time now, have been, I guess, they've there's part of the core part of this article is really a point on we appear to have no fundamental lobbying effort for the beekeeping industry.
I would say the core part of both of those articles are there's no clear leadership for our beekeeping. Now, the Honey Board Association, right, that's honey, not beekeeping. And we don't have the leadership or the lobbyists that other groups have.
Yeah, and the other groups, he calls out a couple of those groups. There's an almond industry that I guess currently probably has probably done the most for beekeeping in terms of how important the professional pollination services are to their industry.
They've certainly done the most for themselves. And like as the gold standard, they are the gold standard of representation and lobbyists and litigation.
Well, I mean, for the beekeeping industry, there's plenty of other lobbying groups. They indicate also the Pork Producers Association, which I think is closely tied to the farm bureaus of the country, and the budget they have for lobbying. So I think there's a couple of other farm-related lobbying industries. The problem is none of those are specific. None of those have the specific needs and concerns of the beekeeping industry as a whole as their primary focus. Yeah.
And I would say none of them do. And we don't have one either. And that's a problem.
And to try to bring that back to something even a smaller scale, just on a state scale, we're supposed to have the Illinois State Beekeeping Association and the ISBA as an organization that was supposed to, my understanding, to pull together the local clubs and sort of give it a state voice to reach out to for lobbying efforts, for the state. We do have state inspectors. We are one of the few states in the continental U.S. that do have official licensed state-employed bee inspectors. So Illinois, in terms of its regulation of the bee industry, we have to have for all of our listeners that are outside of Illinois, we actually have to register our apiary locations with the state of Illinois every year.
For free.
It's free. It's free.
Yep.
And they pay 8 or 10. It's somewhere around in there. State inspectors.
I thought it was 6, but it might be 8.
It might be 8. There's a handful for the entire state.
We have 2 with overlap in our area, just because we kind of sit on
our clubs span several counties through the central and western part of the state, which kind of splits 2 inspectors. But the point is, even with those kind of state level club organizations, I still am not aware of any positive outcomes. I couldn't tell you the last time ISBA reached out or talked about their lobbying efforts on the state level. Like our local club, in fact, has done more for our local municipalities for lobbying, for beekeeping, changes to the ordinances to allow beekeeping within municipalities.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call that lobbying. We're not actually paying anybody for those changes, but we are showing up to boards.
I was going to say that's lobbying. That's showing up, right? That's attending meetings and getting up there and answering questions and providing a voice for the community. For our interests.
And I would say that our club's a little unique. We do have members of the club that are actually pretty active in political groups, right? So,
but does you think that's what it takes?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it takes you knowing somebody at least on a board, or wanting to be available on that board, wanting to be put on that board. That's what it took for. So for those listeners that don't know, I'm from a little town called Chillicothe. Chillicothe is really one of those 2. I think we have 2 stoplights now. Right? Yeah, we moved up to 2. Anyway. Bees were illegal there. They were considered a pest. And so I went in and said, hey, you guys, this is archaic and silly. Why consider this a pest? And they changed the law, so now they're actually we're doing some outreach. They're doing it through the library, right? The library has a beehive, which sadly didn't make it through winter. But the library has a beehive, and they changed some of the laws. And it's really as simple as showing up and saying, hey, I see this is a law. Can we explain why, and what would it take to change it?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with old regulation associated with livestock, because bees are considered livestock.
Yep.
And so getting the written out, a lot of municipalities are changing their ordinances on chickens, so you can have some backyard flocks now, and I think they saw that change with the chickens, and they're like, hey, by the way, there's these other livestock-ish kind of things that are really not actually problematic and are actually beneficial to our communities and serve a positive benefit. And that's how I think that's how we've been able to reach out to and affect change on our local level. So, going back to the larger national level in terms of how these changes are going to impact us, right now, it's not great because, and let me quote from the article, the EPA considers any application of an unregistered pesticide for other than personal use, i.e. application of an unregistered pesticide to another person's property, to be distribution of an unregistered pesticide and a violation of FERPA. And you're like, well, what does that have to do with beekeeping? Well, if you go over to your buddy's house to help him apply a vaporized oxalic acid with your vaporizer that you have, there might be people that would consider that to be an illegal distribution of an unregistered pesticide, as it seems the EPA does not want to consider our vaporized oxalic acid as an approved pesticide, because we are not a licensed, tested, and approved applicator.
Yeah. Not only that, and we should be clear, they've already gone back and said these organic acids are safe. They are, I forget the term that they use for it. I believe it's intolerance. But these are safe. These are exempts from tolerance levels in the hive. So this is kind of an about face on where they've said, oh, yeah, things are safe, but don't use them.
Yeah, so the reason why, so part of the gray area, the EPA, I think the EPA had been using to not pay us a lot of attention in the past was the supposedly 10-acre rule, which had generally meant that within 10 acres or less, you can experiment with pesticides with no permit required. This applies to anything where tolerance exemption on, and that seems reasonable, right? Like that seems to be the sort of, we need the EPA there so that our coal mines and things that are causing problems for our larger environmental issues, right? Like I support that, but at the same time, I don't know that I need the FDA to come raid my apiary of 4 hives because I'm using vaporized oxalic acid or some of the other, Apistan or help me out here, Flumagar,
Formic Pro is really the one that I looked at, but
again, these are all classified in the organic acids of treatments for mites.
Yeah,
thymol, yeah.
And realistically, I don't know that the FDA will be doing that. I think they'll just make things more difficult for us. And we had some discussion. I don't know what the breakdown between your backyard beekeepers providing nukes and packages and stuff compared to the big guys. I think the big guys produce a ton of packages for everybody else.
Yeah,
and I think that the knock-on from that, as the British would say, the fallout from that is if things impact them, they're certainly going to come down the road and impact us. So,
I mean, if you thought your packages were expensive now.
Yeah, exactly. Or wait till something else happens. So the other portion of this legislation that we really haven't talked about is a mite that I'm worried about, triple A-lips mite, that if you find out about it, you're going to be pretty scared. And it's not here yet. My guess, I like making bets, and if I had to make a bet, I would say within 5 years, triple A-lips will be in North America through Canada, via Canada, because Canada brings in all of its bees from the Ukraine, and the triple A-lips was found in the Ukraine this year. And the combination of the triple A-lips, no legislation, poor representation, and an ability to use oxalic acid, which is largely what the countries that triple A-lips currently are in, this is what they use against it, that's a disaster. And that's not one that we as beekeepers can really, especially small beekeepers, I don't think will recover well from that.
So, to sort of sum this up, it sounds like the takeaway from the article was that we need there's a general call. We're currently pursuing hiring a lobbyist to help us with this one issue. If you have a contact or wish to help to make this happen, we accept all the help we can get. So really, for the listener base out there, if you have experience with lobbying, especially on a national level, and you're a beekeeper, there's got to be one or two of us out there.
Yep.
Right. We need to get on this so that we're not mired down in a bunch of regulation.
And it's in a short time frame. There is a Farm Act that was supposed to pass in
Farm Bill
supposed to pass in 2023. It didn't pass, so it's still up. It'll be April, and maybe even May this year that this will happen. So this is something that you can't really sit on. This isn't a get around to it. This is a
wait. So did they push that out to 25 though?
I thought it was 24.
24 or 25?
I think it's 24 that it's pushed out to.
So I think the reason why the Farm Bill was important was because they were hoping to get some exemptions written into the Farm Bill.
Yeah, absolutely.
For these issues.
Yep. And hopefully they do. And if they don't, okay, then we need a plan B. We need a plan B
and
anyway.
Either way, that still needs leadership and lobbying specific for the beekeeping community for not only these issues, but also things like backyard beekeeping in municipalities, and making sure that stays something that we can do legally and successfully.
Yeah, agreed.
We also have the Honeybee Hotline, where we take questions from our listeners. Mostly right now, that's some of our students. I had one of my students from a couple years ago give me a call on Sunday. It was late in the day, about 6 o'clock, and he had been through his hive, and he was somewhat frantic that his hive was bursting like most of ours, and was desperate to get a go, no-go on splitting. And I told him, I said, well, I did my splits, and I knew you had done your splits, so I advised him that for that bursting hive, make a split. And his follow-up question was, hey, I left a medium on my deep, my hive last winter as a honey medium, honey super, and they have moved up into that and laid that up this spring. What do I do with that now?
So I also did that. I did that on a couple of my hives. Interestingly, I had mixed results of them making it or not making it through. And I really think that's largely due to the spread of the amount of miticide that you use in the hive. It kind of, it's too much area for it to disperse through. But they've also laid up that medium at this point, right?
Yep.
The center of that medium's all laid up. So in mine, when I made a split, I took 2 of those medium frames that were laid up. I replaced them with other drawn frames, understanding that we should be in the start of a nectar flow.
Right. With our dandelions. Yep.
Yeah, and we have beautiful dandelion fields. I don't care what anybody says. Dandelions are a pretty yellow little flower. And so I moved those over to a nuke. So here's the follow-up question. Well, what are they going to do with those?
Allowing them to draw drone comb off the bottom of those is certainly a thing you can do.
Which is exactly what they do. I have never had a medium into a hive, and I've done that before, whether out of necessity, right? Because, oops, I don't have frames, and I need to put a frame here, or I'm doing a split like I'm doing right now, and they always draw that out into drone cone.
Now, my only caveat to that is, my strong preference is if I'm putting 2 or more mediums into a deep, to make sure I put a deep, do my best to sandwich a deep, medium, because that doesn't give them, that confines the gap on the bottom of that medium to a single row. Yeah. Because if I start giving them 2 or God forbid 3, the likelihood of cross-combing across those 3 frames drastically rises.
It does. Yeah, that's true.
So,
and it's usually just a little bit of cross-comb.
Yeah.
But you still pulling 2 frames out.
But if you can pull those 2 frames and put them on either side of a drone. Now, again, center the hives, keep your brood together this time of spring, right? You want to keep that all together, not on the edges of the hive. Yep. So, but they'll draw that out on the bottom, and then you'll get drones, and you probably want some drones in the spring for mating queens because you're doing splits, right?
Or if you don't, it's not a big deal to scrape them
off and put them back into your.
Go find your neighborhood chicken raiser, and they do a good job of cleaning that drone comb out pretty quick.
A couple other things. You could potentially go through that medium box and make sure you have identified the queen is not there. Typically, that means you found her down below someplace. Yep. And then if you can identify open brood in that medium box, just take that medium box off and use that as your split. That was sort of the classic walkaway split. The other way is to make your split off of something else, down in your deeps as you normally would make your split. Keep your medium on there, and then when you start to go put your supers on for your honey flow, which, assuming it wasn't 30 degrees and snowing outside, would probably be now, you could go ahead and put your queen excluder on. Again, assuming your queen is below that, not in the medium. Yep. Put your queen excluder on below that, and in 3 weeks it'll all be hatched out, and it'll be a honey super again.
Yeah, and then move it back above. That's the other thing, right? Move it back above after they've hatched it all out.
Well, it's going to be above.
Oh, it's because you're above already.
Above.
Yeah. Make sure your queen's below.
But yeah,
because I've also had that.
I've made that mistake.
Yeah, where she's up above.
I've also advised students on this, and they have made the mistake, and I've come in 2 weeks later, and everything above the queen excluder has been laid up, and I'm like, well, we're making our situation a little bit more complicated. This is going to take a little bit more time.
The other side of that is if they've done that, right? If you've left her up there, you kind of need, in those situations, personally, I like a top entrance.
Absolutely.
The drones are not bright enough to not get stuck in your queen excluder and die and rot, and then you have you have just a mess that you have to clean up. So
top entrances above queen excluders is a go-to.
And the other issue that I've seen, that I've only ever had it happen to me once, was that I put a top entrance in. I had a hive. They had swarmed. The queen left. She came back. There was a top entrance. She decided to go in the top entrance, laid everything full. I knew I had eyes on her, so I knew that she was down below. She left as a virgin queen, came back, and went top entrance. And that doesn't usually happen.
I was going to say, we're talking about some edge case stuff there.
That was edge case, but you have to be aware of when she's laying and then see the eggs and go, oh, I have a problem.
But that's fundamental basic beekeeping, right? Being able to identify what's going on. Are you seeing eggs, right? As part of my basic hive inspections, that beginners ask me, what are you looking for? And my first answer is eggs, right? Because eggs is going to tell me basically everything I need to know.
She's been there within 3 days.
3 days. And I don't need to see her, but if I'm seeing eggs, I know she's here.
And the laying pattern of those eggs is important to me.
Yep.
So when I said early in this, somebody had a spotty pattern. The laying pattern was good. The capped pattern was spotty, and that concerns me, right? Especially if I have hygienic bees, and they got a spotty pattern. Maybe it's a precursor for disease. Maybe it's just a precursor for mites. But be aware of what you're looking for, and keep an open mind.
Yeah, are my open brood cells nice and wet? Are they, can I see a nice milky bottoms for that royal jelly?
Yep.
I want to see nice wet cells.
Yeah.
So all of my attention is going to be focused on looking at those frames, looking for the eggs, and that's the stuff you need to do if you need to identify what frames you need to move over for splits.
And if I see the queen, it's bonus.
Bonus. I did for the big hive. She was a big old fat pinky. She was marked pink from last year, so she's last year's.
Last podcast, I said that I had a great hive from last year, and that queen was overwintered, and she was last year's, red marked queen.
Yeah,
I saw her today. That is not the queen in that hive. She was replaced sometime, probably late fall. We had a long fall last year. I would guess that they replaced her. And she looks great. Again, this goes back to our conversation about...
You going to mark her pink, or are you going to put a blue on her?
I'm going to put a blue on her because this is
the first... blue?
No, it's white.
Oh, it's white.
I think it's white. It might be green.
Might be green. We had where did our little sheet from last week go that we had the colors on it?
I don't know.
We talked about this last week.
It's easy. That one's easy to look up.
It is. I guess for our last segment, droning on, we're going to talk about what we're going to be doing between now and when we get together again. I know for me, I still have to put together wax up some new frames. I will probably, when I went through and did my split, I made some culls. I culled quite a few frames from my dead outs. So those will be going in my solar wax melter now that, theoretically the weather was supposed to be warming up where my solar wax melter would be doing things, but it's probably going to be another week before that's the case. But I'm going to need to replace those with some frames, some rework frames. So a lot of mine are, I don't say a lot of, I probably about run 50-50 between plastic foundation frames and natural wax with wire. The natural wax with wire is always nice because it comes so clean in the solar wax melter, and it's easy to take those apart and add a new sheet of wax to it and reuse the existing frame and wires. The plastic typically doesn't survive.
I've never had it survive
the solar wax melter, which means you just you pop those out, and then you got to kind of clean out the groove and pop a new piece of plastic in.
Yeah, I almost run exclusively plastic foundation double wax. Double wax is the way to go.
Yep.
So almost exclusively double wax plastic foundation, except for in my supers. I really like to use just what's called I call it the lollipop stick method, or the
just the starter strip?
Starter strip on the top. Just a stick. You can go to like a Hobby Lobby and buy those little paste sticks.
You call them craft sticks, Luke.
Thanks. Yeah, craft sticks. Okay. I think when I was small, I ate paste off of them.
Listen, you can if you get the wedge top bars for classic for wax foundation, you can take that little wedge strip, pop it off, and flip it 90 degrees and staple it back on.
Anymore. Those are hard to find.
I mean, all the suppliers typically still carry them. I know our local Hilco guy doesn't, but
I don't think Dayton does. I don't think Weatherby does.
I know they do because I was looking at some.
Were you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of ones that don't carry it anymore. So it's a sad state of affair for those. But yeah, I like using those for my mediums/supers. You can also get cut comb off that. I regularly sell some cut comb.
Cut comb. I do have a little thin surplus left, so I have put thin surplus in for a foundation. I think most of my cut comb frames for the past probably 4 years have been recycled cut comb frames, so they're wireless. And then when I cut the comb out of them, the cut comb shape doesn't completely go top to bottom for that medium, and so I just leave the little like half-inch strip of comb, honey, whatever at the top of the frame, and that's my starter strip.
I do the same, except I make sure that on each side of those cut comb frames they have something that's drawn.
Yep.
So they're not like we talked about before. They're not doing some
cross-combing
and stuff.
Weird. Yep. Absolutely. I think that is going to wrap us up again for this week's episode.
As the hive settles and the bees rest their wings, we bid you farewell from Beekeeping Buddies. Keep nurturing those hives and spreading the buzz.